Good morning, everyone. How's this sound? Do you want it closer? You can hear it. Okay. Welcome to day 263 of COP, or it may feel like that for many of you, to this panel organized by Y Global and Amnesty International on climate organizing and youth. So we're going to discuss civic space for climate organizing, and I'm sure many other issues will come up with our panelists today, all of whom have a variety of rich experiences in different contexts. This event will be recorded and streamed later on the website of the Nordic Pavilion, just for your information. So I just wanted to provide about 90 seconds of framing remarks on civic space and climate and youth organizing, and then we'll pass to our panelists. So as many of you are likely aware, civic space at every level, from the community level in which people live, go to work, go to school, to the COP, is essential for climate justice, right? We can't have climate justice without human rights and without civic space. Those communities that are most affected and harmed by fossil fuel infrastructure, by polluting infrastructure, as well as by the climate crisis itself, and this includes young people who are most harmed, need access to information about what's going on, about science, and they need to be able to participate in climate and energy transition governance at every level as civil society members and as youth. And most importantly, they need the right to protest, including the rights to free expression, association, and peaceful assembly, including for nonviolent direct action, free of a disproportionate response by the state, which we've seen increasingly by youth activists all over the world. Many of the countries in which Amnesty has worked and which some of you may be from have been in situations of restricted civic space for decades. The situation now is the same as it has been. The challenges persist. And at the same time, there's also a very worrying trend of retrenchment, of crackdowns on the rights to free expression, association, and peaceful assembly at countries at all levels of income, in some cases pushed and enabled by the fossil fuel industry. This includes, of course, the ongoing dangers that environmental human rights defenders and land defenders face all over the world, as well as criminalization of specific types of protest that target both pro-Palestinian and climate activists in particular. So with that, and of course at this COP, we've had some of our own issues with civic space, with a protest a few days ago, an Indigenous-led protest resulting in a rather strongly worded letter from the chair of the head of the UNFCCC requesting a crackdown by the security of the government of Brazil and the sort of militarization of the entrance and the COP facility itself, and making many participants feel ill at ease and less able to express themselves freely. So with that, I'm going to pass to our panel. I have here on my left, Mohammed Usrof from the Palestinian Institute for Climate Strategy. Next to him is Nigel Maduro, who's representing the indigenous Kakatiyo Nation of Aruba. And to his left is Selma Fonalop of Nature and Youth in Norway. And then we'll hear closing remarks from Liva and Helena, our colleagues from Y Global. So I wanted to start just by asking a very broad opening question to the three panelists about how you are experiencing climate organizing and civic space and access to information and to the rights to protest in your contexts right now. So we'll go down the line.
Sounds good. Thank you, Marta, and thank you all for hosting us. My name is Mohammed. It's an absolute pleasure being here with such amazing panelists. It's an absolute honor. I will start off by saying that as a Palestinian, sorry, so much like activism the last few days as well, especially. But what I want to say is that being in the COP space and also organizing with local communities and organizing internationally, organizing in multiple contexts, in multiple like disciplines or areas of activism, I think what really comes close to my heart is the idea that peace remains a symptom of justice and will always be. And what that means is that if we in our system collectively lack justice or see injustices, then peace will never be realized and we can never pretend to see peace. So, regarding the vote of the UN Security Council yesterday on the peace process or a plan for rebuilding Gaza or a ceasefire or whatever it is, that is completely rejected because it pretends that the ongoing genocide is not ongoing. It pretends that the genocide, once it ends, people lives just go back to how they were. But we fail to recognize how all of our activism and all of our struggles and all of our systems of oppression are all interconnected. So when it comes to organizing in the civic space, I always think of Palestinians in the West Bank, for example. Ouda Hadalin, a land defender and a community builder and educator in Masafir Yatta in Al Khair, a village in Area C in the West Bank. He was killed in July by a settler who still roams free, who still has the ability to continue harassing Palestinians, to continue expanding their territories, to continue taking our land through multiple measures with state support. And that sort of civic engagement to come alive, considering the atrocities, considering the legal burdens, after Ouda was killed, the international space mobilized, the international activists sort of groups mobilized, villagers in Masafir Yatta mobilized. 60 women went on a hunger strike for Ouda to call for the end of the demolitions. 14 demolition orders as of last week were initiated by the Israeli government of Masafir Yatta. So we call for an end to these demolitions and we call for justice for the killer of Ouda Hadalin, as well as for every other political prisoner who has been abducted by the Israeli regime, besides the ongoing genocide, besides the slow violence of more than 100 years. And I'm sure we'll talk about the just energy transition and we'll talk about the systems in Palestine and how they're all connected to the rest of the world. But for me, I always see Palestine as a microcosm of the world on fire. We've seen how the world has mobilized with the ongoing genocide. We've seen how Nestle, Coca-Cola, and Pepsi and other corporations are so entrenched in the terrorism happening in Palestine, but are so entrenched with what's happening here in Brazil, with what's happening in Colombia, in South Africa, in all across the globe, in different contexts, in different ways. So I hope that by the end of the panel, we have that very clear and set. Thank you.
Check, check. Oh, hi. Masyadang kipalagamit ako nung kubusunang. Mita muto agresido kubusunang tikinang kumi. Thank you for having me here. I really, really appreciate it. So yeah, I am from a very, very small island in the Caribbean region called Aruba. And as an activist there, I am the main frontline climate and land defender there. So it's very difficult to mobilize my community in a sense that because it's a small island, yes, you could gather a big group of people, but also they could target you much faster. They could find you in the area much faster. So whenever I am defending my land from extractivism companies that are land grabbing like hotels and tourism industries, I am easily prosecuted on the island. I've been arrested twice for defending my land. I've been targeted. I've had smear campaigns done against me just for protecting my island and raising awareness of climate action on the island. And I feel like it's very, very dangerous as well. When I was arrested, they did not give me water when I was locked up. So that's against my human rights as well. And I am also trying to protect my human rights in the climate space. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just like Mohammed said, our problems are very much interconnected. So like I said, so what's happening in one country automatically happens in another country. We're all interconnected. So if you extract something from one country, you take it to another place, you're gonna be interconnected. And I could see how me and Palestine, Aruba and Palestine are also interconnected. We have a couple of hotel owners on Aruba that are also Zionist Israelis, and they are land grabbing as well on our island and just developing big companies, big corporations, in order to extract and get money. So that's how we are also interconnected. But it's also from our own differences that in the Caribbean space, in the climate space in the Caribbean. Shananin, Ivan, hi. Yeah, in the climate space there. In the Caribbean region, we don't have much visibility, especially in these places. Now I'd like to show of hands. How many people here have bumped into a Caribbean person in COP? Yeah, exactly. So we are not much represented here. So whenever we raise our voices back home, some people don't even take us seriously because they don't believe climate change is real. They don't believe the human rights issues are real within the Caribbean region. So whenever we do certain activities or activism or fighting for our human rights, it's sometimes unheard of. Sometimes it's very difficult to mobilize because of the prosecution that happens afterwards, or it's dangerous. So yeah, that's more or less about how it is on my island in terms of activism in the human rights and climate space sphere, and also how our struggles are also interconnected in a way. So yeah.
Okay, no, it's working. There. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Selma. I'm from the Norwegian organization Nature and Youth, Natur og Ungdom. And I think this is really interesting what you're telling about because I think that in Norway, the fact that we can't really relate to this pressure on democracy that you're talking about is a really important perspective. And our enormous privilege of having the right to protest and being protected by the state is important. But still, what continues to surprise me with Norway is with our democracy and our protection for protesting and democracy. We still have huge pressure on indigenous rights, for example. So even though we're protected as activists and as youth, we see that the indigenous peoples of Norway are still being pressured and their human rights are under attack. And that's why this intersection between activism and democracy and human rights is so important, and in Norway as well, because we have this right, but we can see that not everyone has the rights, their human rights. So in Norway, it's really important that the youth use this voice. So our organization has been working a lot, and me as well, on the Sami people's rights, and in the Norwegian fjord, where they're building a mine that is going to dump in the fjord 30 million tons of waste and destroy all the fjord, and also affect the Sami reindeer herding area, which is we think that it's given in a legal manner, and we're protesting with civil disobedience to this. So I think this intersection is really interesting, in that even though we have a strong democracy, we can see that the indigenous rights are being pressured, and that the reindeer herding areas are being destroyed. Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome. Because I didn't learn how to pronounce your name before, if you could introduce yourself, your name, and your organization, and then the first question that everyone is answering is how they're experiencing climate activism and organizing in the context of civic space and free expression and association and peaceful assembly in your context.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Shananin. Sorry for being late. I'm from Puebla, the Valley of Tehuacan in Mexico. I come from Ingiwa territory, and it's actually in there where we have been organizing a lot with the climate movement, but also with the ancestral historical land defense movement in our region. And as part of Legado Gaia, that is a youth initiative that has been created, I think, since 2021. We have been organizing to create this bridge between the indigenous peoples, peasant peoples movement, and climate activism at the international level. So for us, it is very important to make mobilization and to be allowed to do that. As well as part of our territory, we have NATSU, that is a territory initiative from the different communities of the Valley of Tehuacan region. And what we have experienced for these past administrations that are so-called from the left is that there is still an ongoing system that is being replicated that is based on extraction despite everything for the sake of a development that never comes to our communities. So oftentimes when we have organized, we have protests, and we have even shut down industries for days for be able to defend our right to self-determination as indigenous peoples, but also our right to a healthy environment. We have been targeted as well. At least I believe that for some of us, we still do not face a threat like some other in our communities and some other in our movements that have even been threatened to leave their own land because like these industries that we are fighting against are definitely in a position of power that is being defended by the government as well, because it's like their interests that are at stake when we demand justice. So I believe that even though there is like a lot of movement and mobilization, there is still a lot of repression from even the left.
Thank you. So before the panel started, we had an interesting short discussion amongst us about the just transition. And of course, there are several people here from Norway, which is an oil-producing country, and what the just transition means or looks like from a youth activism standpoint in your context, if that's something that you discuss or how it comes up in your experience of extractivism for transition minerals or whatever the context might be, because there's a wide variety of different experiences here. So we'll start with you, Mohammed.
All right. So on the just transition in general, but also speaking on the energy transition is meant to be a substitution and never an addition. But what we're witnessing in our negotiations and witnessing in our own local context is an energy transition of addition, where we keep consuming more and more and more, and we only start replacing sort of our habits with other habits that remain colonial, that remain extractive, that remain exploitative in essence. It is as long as we pursue profit, as long as we extract from communities, as Nigel was saying, we see patterns of the global north extracting from the global south for the benefit of the global north. At the same time, we see experimentation in the global south for the benefit of the global north. To me, just transition means a just transition away from green colonialism. It means that we don't greenwash colonial aspects of our transition. A just transition means that we must recognize the system that we live in and its extractiveness, how fossil fuels are related to imperialism, how fossil fuels are related to power, how fossil fuels are related to wars and militarism. So when it comes to the question of Palestine, I look at it multiple ways. The Israeli government is the same government that greenwashes colonialism in the Western, in the Syrian Golan Heights. So they have initiated renewable energy project for the sake of land grabs. The same patterns are seen in the Western Sahara by the Moroccan government. So that is green colonialism that we see in our bare, like just eyes, and it happens in Palestine as well. On green colonialism as well, we see other patterns such as false climate solutions and solar geoengineering being another facet of being a dual use, greenwashed military and also like just a false climate solution in general. Solar geoengineering in Palestine, there's a US Israeli company called Stardust Solutions that has just recently fundraised as of 2 weeks ago $60 million as a for profit company, $60 million to experiment in Palestine outdoors and indoors, and that is extremely dangerous for Palestinians and extremely dangerous for the rest of the world because with the ongoing genocide, we do not recognize the amount of military emissions and in general climate reparations that are needed for Palestinians to even begin to realize the ongoing situation. In terms of military emissions, we're talking about hundreds of years of rebuilding, but also hundreds of tons, 100 millions of tons of CO2 emissions that is going to harm the entire world and the entire planet and not just Palestine. So to me, a just energy transition is a transition away from the systems that are extractive and exploitative and onto new actual projects that are renewable, that are sovereign, that are just, that are feminist, that are fast, that are equitable, and doesn't ignore the realities on the ground and doesn't ignore people. And that, again, is the case in every other context. Thank you.
Yeah. So for me, I can give it from a Caribbean context. So Aruba is very close to Venezuela. Venezuela is the largest petrol export in the world. They have the biggest oil reserves in the world. So we are in the coast of Venezuela. So we also have some oil and petrol and gas in the area. Aruba, we used to be the biggest oil and petrol reserve during the World War II. We had the oil refinery right there, and we had a lot of migrants that came there too to work, to get better jobs. But during the World War, they saw the collapse of it, and slowly but surely, they closed it down. To this day, that oil reserve is still standing there. It is still standing there, but it's just collapsing. It's just rusty. It's left alone. And a week ago, our ministers just announced, our government just announced that they will finally dismantle the area. It took a century to get over it. It took a century to decide we're going to dismantle it. That's a slow burn in terms of climate change. It's a slow burn. Every time it rains in Aruba, all the waste, all the pollution from the rusty things, from the leftover oils in there, still goes into our water and goes into our food systems. We eat from the ocean. It's still there, a century old. We've been getting a slow burn climate disaster. And right now, what we see is that our energy, we're a Caribbean island. We don't have much of a big energy transition thing anymore. However, we are currently exploring our waters right now for gas and LNG, all these things. And we're building gas pipelines as well as a transitional energy source, which is also extractivist in its essence. You're extracting from You're extracting from Mother Earth. Now, that gas, you see the gas rig in the coast of the island. You see it just floating there looking like a haunted Disney castle. It's kind of scary also in the distance. But here is where I am very critical about how we are viewing energy. The way they view energy is by extracting from nature, from extracting from my mother. But energy is everywhere. Energy is from the sun. Energy is from the wind. Energy is from the waves. Why are we not considering that we need to regenerate and recover from all the damages and extractivism that we've done throughout centuries from such a small island? Such a small island, and we are doing so much abuse to the land, the waters. It's not necessary. So this is where the just transition is very important, to have also an indigenous perspective in it, so that we can consider our reconnection and relationship with our mother and to treat her well. To also consider that we do not need to extract in order for the energy transition.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in Norway the just transition applies to two different aspects. First of all, as a big oil and fossil producing country that is exporting to all over the world, we need to recognize our responsibility to work for a just transition. And the Norwegian delegation, the Norwegian ministers they're really eager to say that this is a collaboration, and we need to wait for the consumers to lower their consumption and to lower the wish for oil in the world, and then we can lower our production. And that's what we're working on, or some of the things we're working the most on here is pressuring Norway to view their responsibility as an oil producing country, to recognize that our industry is participating in green colonialism and in dangerous structures in the world, and also holding back the transition in other countries. So this is a really important aspect, and really important for Norway. And also, since we're such a big oil producing country, this is a big industry in Norway. So just transition is also local in Norway, making sure that all the people that has invested their whole career and their whole livelihoods into the oil industry are ensured a just transition. So this is a really big workers' rights case in Norway. We need to make sure that all the people working in this industry are being transferred in a respectful and also a well thought through manner. So that's why it's really important that big producer countries such as Norway make a good and a plan for phasing out the oil and phasing out fossil fuels. That is, it's long and it's starting right now to make sure this is being done in a manner that will not harm all the people working in this industry. Because if we wait until we have until we need to transition really quickly, this will not be done in a way that will preserve the workers' rights in our
Yeah, I think that first for context, because of this new administration being led by a president that is a climate scientist and is progressive, one of their major tasks that they have been doing during the past two is that they have nationalized lithium, but also a lot of the concessions that are in the Mexican territory have been given before that those administrations to multinational companies that are now operating through filiaries that are harder to track than where they come from. So I think for a lot of our communities, even talking about climate change and a just transition is very far away, and it's also it's creating a lot of skepticism to the people, because the only things that we have been seeing from all these initiatives is being replicated across the same system of fossil extractivism that is already settled in Mexico in the National Petroleum Company. So what we have been seeing as well is that a lot of the movements are very reticent to getting all these terminology, but also getting the point across that this is a legitimate fight and that this does not have to be in the same way that the industries and the government have been doing it. So I believe that what I also like to say a lot is that we do need a just transition, but we do not just need a transition. So to say that we really need to radically change the system to be able for it to not replicate the same mistakes as others have said already. So I believe that for us as well, it is very important to then challenge the colonial mindset that is being replicated across all of this, because recently in the Valley of Tehuacan there has been exploration for the exploitation of lithium and mining in our territories that has not been transparent, that it has not been communicated to nor to the communities where destruction is happening or to the region that is being affected because of this, because our territory is a semi-desert. So for us, water and the water cycle is very important, not only for spirituality but for the sustain of life. And for lithium mining, one of the most used resources is water. So it is very water intensive, and communities and the people that work the land or that live from the land, all of us, we do not understand like to what amount it is going to impact our whole lives and the lives of future generations. So I believe that there is also this new, like, this need to decolonize not only our mindsets but the mindsets of the people that are leading all these industries, because a lot of the narratives that are having seen not only in this space but in others, where companies and industries are talking about how they're changing and how they're becoming green and they're having this new also tries to make a new system, it is often led by, again, a greed to create profit out of a crisis that it has already taken so much life from the earth. And what they are trying is to, again, make a different, like a different way to keep extracting from life. So for us, that is not only the financial system that is profiting out of destruction, but also the material system that is literally extracting from our land still. So we believe that it is very challenging to then come to these spaces and talk about all realities when everything that is being talked about is in different terms from what we are experiencing.
Thank you. And I think you've reached a really nice 3/4 of the way through point where you started by explaining how you experience civic space and climate activism in your context. What does that mean? What does the concept mean for you? And now you've all argued for how crucial activism and is in ensuring that the transition doesn't replicate the same kinds of human rights violations, the same kind of exploitation for the system we have. So it's not only about what's an enabling an environment, but arguing very persuasively, as you have, for why it's essential and why it's important. So with that, we have a nice audience here. We have a closing question, but I want to first turn to see if there's anyone from the audience that wants to ask any questions. If your question is specific to the panelist, please say so. Otherwise, we'll give them all a chance to answer. So we'll do that for a few minutes before we move to a closing. Any questions? You all need more coffee before questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. I have a question to all of you, actually. Maybe if you could summarize what would be the best outcome of COP 2025 for you. Thank you.
Any other questions before we take a crack at that? Okay. Okay, thank you. So we have a question on what you think is the best, what would be the ideal outcome out of COP30 for you? And then the closing question that I had that we sort of discussed was, what are some key lessons that you've learned as youth climate activists that you want to share with the group? And so each panelist can take both or either of those, and we'll move through before we hear the closing remarks. Thanks.
All right, I will try to be short, concise, but I think there's a lot to cover. So the reason I'm here at COP is to talk about the just energy transition, but to also talk about the realities on the ground. What's happening right now in terms of slow violence and genocide and killing happened 100 years ago and happens thousands of years ago to other contexts. Electricity was introduced in Palestine in 1920s by a Zionist called Rutenberg from Russia, bringing electricity in a time where Israel wasn't existing. It was under the British mandate. Palestine was under the British mandate at the time. electricity was part of the infrastructure that I was talking about in the previous response. Infrastructure of colonialism and imperialism, inequalities being created by the distribution of resources unequally, to 80% of electricity going to 20% of the population, and 80% of the and 20% of the electricity going to 80% of the population. Electricity and fossil fuels being distributed in that manner will have clear reflections on the socio-technological formation of society over time, allowing for security establishments, allowing for water control, resource control, apartheid essentially being built over time. And that is the distinct or stark reality of colonialism and of apartheid and of infrastructure at the time. So there's different schools of thought on terms of how people see infrastructure. What I'm trying to get to is that happened in 1920s. In 1936, people from the 1920s, the minute it was introduced, people were already boycotting electricity from the Palestinian Electricity Company that was co-opted by the Zionists and co-opted by the British. What I'm trying to say is that there were movements, social movements and civic engagement all the way back from Haifa to Tul Karim to Ramallah in the early 1920s. And in 1936, people were blowing up pipelines. People were sabotaging the pipeline of imperialism. In 1960s, 1970s, Egypt became complicit in its trade with Israel. They were supporting and they were supplying LNG and gas to Israel. In 2020, we see the reversal of the Ashkelon-Arish pipeline, where Israel is now sending gas to Egypt, and that is being exported to the EU. My point here is that the EU is complicit in terms of international law and customary law, and there's a clear breach of violation of Palestinian consent. Palestinian fisher folk have been killed on our Gaza shore because of protection of the gas field. So we have a naval blockade of 6 miles that is not much. People cannot fish. And even when they're within the blockade, within that naval blockade, people are still being killed. So what I'm trying to say is that imperial logic of, we just want to impose restrictions and impose, because Palestine is also recognized by 80% of the UN states. It's a sovereign state, yet it doesn't get royalties or bonuses through its, because the gas does go through its own waters. So it's going through Palestinian land of the state of Palestine that is recognized by the UN, by all the countries in the EU. So that breach of international law and humanitarian law, besides the ongoing genocide, besides the fact that the EU and Nordic countries are complicit in sending fuel and military equipment to the Israelis during genocide, I think this is a call to action to the Nordic folk, to people and activists in the EU, solidarity groups, feminist groups, even indigenous groups, and people of all color, to come together to talk about these atrocities, but to also sabotage and have a complete refusal of that complicity. If we want to stand up for humanity and stand up for a just transition, and however way you want to greenwash humanity, if you want to stand up for humanity, then you have to recognize your role in that. Because the longer you refuse it, the more you're going to forget your own humanity. And it becomes a difficult question to yourself: how authentic are we in the activism that we do? So I'm just going to leave sort of that point, because what I hope out of COP30 is that people begin to realize how, as the other panelists have said, our struggle is interconnected, but our resistance is interconnected. People resisting colonialism and land theft and selling of land in Aruba is connected to what's happening in Palestine, because it is the same perpetrator of violence in this case, especially, very particularly, but also happens really in many other contexts. So whether it's Zionism or capitalism or whatever regime or ideology that is going after people in the global south and going after the 99%, I think it is up to the 99% to stand up for that. So I just hope that COP30 has become a symbol clear enough, with the indigenous people trying to have their voices into the space, but being rejected and denied time and time again, in which they have to show a force, a show of force, a show of power, a show of community, a show of love. And yet people in the negotiation space have a complete, just complete rejection of that. I'll leave it here. Thank you all.
Yeah. So in terms of the outcomes that I would like to see more inclusion of indigenous peoples in decision making and more mention of indigenous peoples. We are the ones that are protecting biodiversity. We protect 80% of the biodiversity of the world. Why are we not included in these spaces? Why are we not included in decision-making processes? We are in the Amazon right now. Why are indigenous Amazonians not being allowed inside? It's like I'm coming into someone's home and selling their furniture without their consent. Like indigenous peoples all around the world are struggling with this neo-colonialism, and the colonialism aspect is what caused climate change to Palestine, to the Caribbean region, to the Sami people, everywhere around the globe. It's the same interconnected things that are happening. So we need to include indigenous peoples in these spaces much more, and allow them to have a stronger voice and decision-making power, because you are negotiating our livelihoods, our lands, how we are protecting the climate ourselves. We understand climate change the most. Why are we not allowed in these spaces? So what I want as the outcome is the inclusion and decision-making and stewardship. Today is the negotiating day of indigenous peoples as well. And I really, really hope that we are mentioned more often and we have more decision-making power as well. Another thing that I really like to see in terms of outcome is to understand that islanders are the ones suffering the most. In 20 years, some beaches in Aruba is gonna be disappeared completely. Places that I learned how to swim, gone. My human rights, my heritage, gone. Why are the islanders not at the front line here in these spaces? Why are we not talking more? Why don't we have decision-making power as well? So I want islanders to have much more of a platform so they could talk about their struggles, our experiences, everything. And just to close it off, I would also like to see them to also mention genocide, the realities that's happening right now. It's also exacerbating climate change. The bombs that are constantly being dropped, the carbon emissions, the extraction, the land grabbing, all these things. Again, in different lands, Palestine, Aruba, in the Sami territory, in Puebla, Mexico, like everywhere. It's happening everywhere. We need to understand the interconnectedness of these issues. I would really like them, the leaders out there, so-called leaders, to really step up. Because in a couple years, in 50 years, my island will probably be gone. It'll be probably gone. So I really want people to step up, include us more. Have us at the front line. We're already experiencing the worst climate crises that we can ever imagine. Hurricanes, flooding, drought, heat waves, all these things. And we still don't have the platform. We still are not being heard. When are we going to be heard? So the outcome, it's the 30th COP. COP is as old as I am. Like, I really want us to change the entire system of how it works. So yeah, I can keep going, but there's a lot that I want to see in terms of outcomes. But yeah, it's crazy.
Thank you. We're over time already, so I'm so sorry to do this. But if you both could keep your just brief ending remarks, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep it short. I really hear what has been said right now, and I think the point that everything is interconnected is really important. I hear that we need to see ambition where we need ambition, and we need to see that the countries being responsible for the climate change are being held responsible, and them recognizing their own responsibilities and their own power. So not to repeat what you've been saying, I think an additional point is that I hope that we'll see more ambition and also more recognizing of the countries actually standing for the pollution, recognizing their own responsibilities. Because as of now, it looks like the countries the most responsible are also the least willing to recognize their own responsibilities.
I think for me, something that I would like to have, not from precisely the negotiations, but of the movements that we're part of here, is that we challenge again the power that we have, not only the one they have, but because something that I have learned across the experiences and the movements is the power of solidarity and also of international solidarity. Like, we don't only need these spaces to come together to bring our solutions to work together, but we can have our own spaces, and they are already happening. Like, we did the Mesoamerican Caravan for Climate and Life, and that was only possible because of international solidarity. A lot of it because of our brothers and sisters in the global north, like in the US and Europe. So I believe that is really what is keeping us together, what is sustaining not only this system, but only these spaces is us. So we have this power, and I believe that we have to just get together and bring our power together as well.
It's a lovely note to end on. Thank you. Any closing remarks? Are you? Okay, yeah. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you especially to the panelists. As COP drags on, I know we're all tired, and we all appreciate the passion and the honesty that you brought to this conversation. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.